Good evening, and welcome to Sky Tonight. The last quarter moon is 52% illuminated and located in Aries. You can see it rising near midnight, highest at dawn. Please enable captions in your language to view local observing cities and times. Join us for a guided tour of the entire sky visible tonight. We start the evening with Venus halfway up the southern sky, then look almost straight overhead for the Hercules cluster and the Ring Nebula, finishing with Albireo high in the southern sky. As the night deepens, Altair and the Dumbbell Nebula sit high in the southern sky, while the Fireworks Galaxy appears high in the northern sky and Mars rests near the eastern horizon, all accompanied by the Alpha Capricornids meteors. Toward morning, the southern Delta Aquariids meteors arrive, followed by Mercury near the eastern horizon and Saturn halfway up the southern sky, with Algol almost straight overhead and Polaris high in the northern sky, alongside the Perseids meteors. We close the night with satellites crossing the face of the moon. Look halfway up the southern sky for Venus, a dazzling silver-white point that dominates the view. It is visible to the naked eye and outshines every star. In Los Angeles, the planet culminates at 8:20 in the evening, while in New York and London it reaches its greatest altitude at 8:40 in the evening and 9:25 in the evening respectively. Because Venus shines both before dawn and after dusk, the ancient Greeks long believed they were seeing two different objects, a morning star they called Phosphorus and an evening star they called Hesperus. Find the Hercules cluster almost straight overhead in the constellation Hercules. You will need binoculars to spot this dense, ancient globular cluster, which appears as a dim fuzzball on the west side of the Keystone asterism. Around 8:40 in the evening, the cluster is best placed in Los Angeles and New York, and it culminates in London at 9:25 in the evening. In 1974, the Arecibo radio telescope beamed the famous Arecibo message, a coded radio portrait of humanity, toward this cluster. The signal will travel for about 25,000 years, and any reply would take another 25,000 to come back. Tonight's deep sky object is the Ring Nebula, a tiny glowing donut of gas puffed off by a dying star. Aim a telescope midway between the two southern stars of the little parallelogram of Lyra, just below brilliant Vega. The nebula reaches its highest point around 10:50 in the evening in Los Angeles, New York, and London. The Ring Nebula only looks like a flat ring because we happen to view it nearly end-on. It is really a three-dimensional, barrel-shaped cloud of gas, more like a donut or a bottle than a hoop. Locate Albireo high in the southern sky at the foot of the Northern Cross in Cygnus. It is visible to the naked eye as a golden yellow star, but a small telescope splits it beautifully into a gold and a blue pair. This star culminates around 11:30 in the evening in Los Angeles, New York, and London. Data from the Gaia spacecraft released in 2018 showed the two bright stars drifting in very different directions, leading many astronomers to suspect that Albireo is merely an optical double, a chance lineup rather than a true bound pair, though the question remains debated. Find Altair high in the southern sky as the bright star flanked by two fainter ones, forming the low corner of the summer triangle. This nearby white star spins so fast it is flattened at the poles. Around 11:50 in the evening, this star reaches its greatest altitude in Los Angeles, New York, and London. In ancient Chinese mythology, Altair represents Niulong, the cowherd, eternally separated from his lover Xinu, the weaver girl, represented by Vega, by the celestial river, Milky Way. This celestial love story inspired the Qixi Festival, celebrated on the 7th day of the 7th lunar month, where lovers exchange gifts and pray for the separated star lovers to reunite, making Altair central to one of Asia's oldest romantic traditions. Sweep binoculars or a telescope just north of the Little Arrow of Sagitta to find the Dumbbell Nebula in Vulpecula. This green-tinged puff of gas rides the summer Milky Way below Cygnus. The nebula culminates around 12 midnight in Los Angeles, New York, and London. The Dumbbell Nebula is one of the brightest and largest planetary nebulae in the sky, shining at about magnitude 7.4 and easily caught with a pair of binoculars. The Alpha Capricornids meteors are active now, though 6 days past their peak and fading. Look halfway up the southern sky in Capricornus and let your eyes wander a bit off the radiant for the longest trails, with an estimated 2 meteors per hour. The radiant reaches its highest point around 12:25 after midnight in Los Angeles, New York, and London. Tonight's deep sky object is the Fireworks Galaxy, a face-on spiral famous for frequent supernovae. Sweep the border of Cepheus and Cygnus with a telescope, using Deneb towards Cepheus as your guide, and remember that dark skies matter more than magnification. The galaxy remains above the horizon all night and culminates around 12:35 after midnight in Los Angeles, New York, and London. It sits right on the border between Cygnus and Cepheus, which means reference books cannot agree on which constellation it belongs to. In catalogs, it is listed as NGC 6946. Look near the eastern horizon for Mars, which is rising in Taurus. It appears as an orange-red point visible to the naked eye. The earliest rise belongs to London at 1:32 in the morning, with New York following at 2:11 in the morning and Los Angeles at 2:27 in the morning. The average temperature on Mars is about -65 degrees Celsius, with temperatures near the poles dropping as low as -140 degrees Celsius during polar winter. Now we turn to the crossings of Phobos and Deimos across the face of Mars. Phobos begins its first crossing of the apparent disk of Mars, a passage lasting 54 minutes. Mars is above the horizon for all 3 cities. The crossing runs from 6:05 in the morning to 6:59 in the morning in Los Angeles, from 9:05 in the morning to 9:59 in the morning in New York, and from 2:05 in the afternoon to 2:59 in the afternoon in London. Deimos makes its first crossing of the apparent disk of Mars, a passage lasting 83 minutes. In Los Angeles, this crossing runs from 6:53 in the morning to 8:16 in the morning while Mars is above the horizon. In New York, it runs from 9:53 in the morning to 11:16 in the morning while Mars is above the horizon. And in London, it runs from 2:53 in the afternoon to 4:16 in the afternoon while Mars is above the horizon. Phobos continues its next crossing of the apparent disk of Mars, a passage lasting 54 minutes. In Los Angeles, this crossing runs from 1:45 in the afternoon to 2:39 in the afternoon while Mars is above the horizon, while in New York and London, Mars is below the horizon. Phobos continues its next crossing of the apparent disk of Mars, a passage lasting 54 minutes. In London, this crossing runs from 5:24 in the morning to 6:18 in the morning while Mars is above the horizon, while in Los Angeles and New York, Mars is below the horizon. The Southern Delta Aquariids meteors are active now, 6 days past their peak and fading. Look halfway up the southern sky in Aquarius and let your eyes wander a bit off the radiant for the longest trails, with an estimated 9 meteors per hour. The radiant culminates around 2:40 in the morning in Los Angeles, New York, and London. Look near the eastern horizon for Mercury, which is rising in Gemini. It is visible to the naked eye as a steady point of light. 4:38 in the morning is the moment the planet rises in Los Angeles, 4:25 in the morning in New York, and 3:54 in the morning in London. Mercury is locked in a 3-2 spin orbit resonance, spinning exactly 3 times for every 2 trips around the Sun, so a single solar day there lasts about 176 Earth days, longer than its 88-day year. Look halfway up the southern sky for Saturn, a steady, unblinking golden point in Pisces. It is visible to the naked eye and fainter than Jupiter, though twilight may still brighten the sky at its best moment. Around 4:50 in the morning, the planet reaches its highest point in Los Angeles, New York, and London. Saturn's rings are enormous yet astonishingly thin. They span about 280,000 kilometers, but in most places they are only a few tens of meters thick, the scale of a sheet of paper the width of a football pitch. Find Algol almost straight overhead in Perseus, located below the W of Cassiopeia. It is visible to the naked eye as a bright white star that visibly dims and brightens as a dark companion crosses it. In Los Angeles, this star stands highest at 5:35 in the morning, while in New York it reaches its greatest altitude at 5:20 in the morning, and in London it remains above the horizon all night, culminating at 4:45 in the morning. Algol earned ominous names across cultures. Hebrew tradition called it Rosh HaSatan, Satan's head, while in Chinese it is Alingwu, the fifth star of the mausoleum, asterism linked to tombs and the dead. Follow the pointer stars of the Big Dipper to Polaris, the brightest point of Ursa Minor. It is one of the 50 brightest stars in the whole night sky, visible to the naked eye high in the northern sky. It never sets from any of the three cities, standing highest at 4:45 in the morning in London, at 5:20 in the morning in New York, and at 5:35 in the morning in Los Angeles. Thanks to its stable position near the celestial pole, every observer in the northern hemisphere can always determine the direction of north simply by finding Polaris in the night sky. The Perseids meteors are active now, building to their peak in 7 days. Look high in the northern sky in Perseus and let your eyes wander a bit off the radiant for the longest trails, with an estimated 29 meteors per hour. The radiant never sets from any of the three cities, standing highest at 4:45 in the morning in London, at 5:20 in the morning in New York, and at 5:35 in the morning in Los Angeles. Satellites cross the moon's disk 13 times on this night, with 9 of those tracks passing close to towns and settlements, and 6 of those are presented here. The Tiangong space station makes its first crossing of the night, and for an observer standing on the narrow ground path, the crossing of the disk takes only about 1 second. The ground path runs from near Sintang at 4 in the morning to near Calbayog City at 5:05 in the morning. The second crossing of the night is again by the Tiangong space station. Its ground path runs from west of Mbandaka at 4:09 in the morning to near Ad Duyum at 5:14 in the morning. The third crossing of the night is again by the Tiangong space station. Its ground path runs from southwest of Arito at 4:18 in the morning to near Fort-de-France at 5:24 in the morning. The fourth crossing of the night is again by the Tiangong space station. Its ground path runs from northeast of Garissa at 4:37 in the morning to over the open Indian Ocean at 5:42 in the morning. The fifth crossing of the night is again by the Tiangong space station. Its ground path runs from over the open Atlantic at 4:42 in the morning to near Zinder at 5:47 in the morning. The sixth crossing of the night is again by the Tiangong space station. Its ground path runs from over the open Indian Ocean at 5:05 in the morning to near Molbugal at 5:40 in the morning. A total solar eclipse is coming soon. Follow Sky Tonight for details. Check back tomorrow for your next nightly sky guide. Subscribe for more, and I wish you clear skies and good observing.